in the chat. The Rail team will be helping out with tech if you have any questions, and closed captions are available, and you can turn those on by pressing the CC button at the bottom of your screen. We close all of our lunchtime conversations with a poem, and today we're delighted to have poet Chris Martin read for us today. The Brooklyn Rail stands in solidarity with the uprising unfolding across the country following the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Nina Pop, David McAddy, James Scurlock, Jamel Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and in response to generations of structural violence against Black communities. Black Lives Matter, and we will continue to support ongoing action in the struggle for racial justice. Before I introduce our host and guests, we'd like to begin with a brief moment of silence. Thank you. And now to introduce today's host, Thyrza Nichols Goodeve is a writer, editor, artist, and interviewer. She currently teaches several graduate programs at SVA and is spending her time in quarantine learning to embroider. From 2017 to 2019, she was the senior art editor of the Brooklyn Rail, and she is now an editor at large at the Rail. And Thyrza, now I'll hand it off to you to introduce Adam.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here and to see this remarkable setup that the Brooklyn Rail has got going. I've been watching many of these, and I'm so happy to be able to be the host for this one. I wanted to just wish, this is totally, it has nothing to do with today's topic, but I heard today that it's Octavia Butler's 73rd birthday. If she was alive, for those of you who know about science fiction, so I wanted to wish her a happy birthday. Anyway, delighted to be speaking with Adam McEwen, whose work, I think, ranges from deceptively simple to ontologically overwhelming. So how's that for a, so we'll see in which directions that we go. And so I'm going to introduce Adam because as a teacher, I often have to teach or work with students on their statements. So I was very impressed with the one from Gagosian and just wanted to read it and then have Adam maybe react to it a bit. Adam McEwen's work resides somewhere between the celebratory and funereal. After writing obituaries for the Daily Telegraph in London, he began producing obituaries of living subjects such as Bill Clinton and Jeff Koons, highlighting the blurred line between history and fiction. In a reverse Midas-effect, McEwen has answered to the, has answered to the shimmering claims of minimalist art by creating contemporary work that is freighted with the leaden melancholy of modern history. So Adam, that's an awful lot to put on your shoulders, but I just thought people should hear that. As a
say that second sentence again. The one with leaden melancholy.
Yeah, your work is freighted with the leaden melancholy of modern history. Right. Which I like because I want to, talk about your work in terms of today. I think that's where I'll end. It goes on. McEwen's dead zone of dark relics and faded memories confronts us literally and metaphysically with the filthy lucre of our past and present. So how do you feel having that kind of a statement out there? Did you write it? You didn't write it.
No, I didn't. I mean, I recognize like a couple of parts of it. I think because I think these things tend to get they evolve through successive years of press releases. But I mean, it sounds like ways I've heard my work described before, and
Yeah.
I'm fine with it. Yeah, I mean, and it mentions it mentions minimalism
Yeah.
briefly. There's a reference to minimalism, and there's a reference to filthy, or the word filthy. So I think filthy and minimalism is good and is relevant.
That sounds in all of your work there always seems to be these two grand things that are sort of bumping into each other. But before we get into the work, I just thought it would be nice to hear you just a little bit of your background, because you came to New York in the year 2000, but before that you were at Cal Arts, right, in the early 90s,
Yeah.
and you were born in Scotland.
No, I was born in London.
Born in London, and come from a family, for those of you who don't know, of quite remarkable artists. And I thought I would like to just hear you sort of talk about that trajectory, because growing up in a family of artists that way, or where art was, there was so much pressure. How did you react to that? Because I get the sense that you're in a way an unwilling artist, right? You're an artist by default, that you became an artist after doing many different things, right? So do you think that the kind of work you make comes out of a kind of resistance to having been brought up around a lot of painting and music and stuff like that?
I didn't say hello to anyone. I don't know that I'm an unwilling artist. I think I mentioned, I mean, my dad, my father was an artist, and then there was other artists in the family. One of my sisters is an artist, and I think that I always painted and made things, and there was a lot of that making going on as when I was young, and so I was always making things and painting, and when the art prize at school and stuff, there was like a thing you did, but then when I was in my late teens, I think my I don't want to bring in the sort of biographical, but my dad died when I was 17. So I think for quite a few years, I deliberately refused. I sort of turned away from the idea of being an artist, because it seemed, actually my dad had never sort of encouraged me to be an artist. Really, he was like, you should be a lawyer. It's a much better, it's a much more reliable, or an architect, or and it wasn't until I was after university, until I was 24, that I finally sort of gave in. I was like, well, actually,
what I mean, like there was a bit of resistance. You gave into it because the kind of art you make is very different than, say, your father's art, which is these precise, gorgeous paintings.
Right. But making the decision to do it seemed to be loaded with other decisions relating to your own kind of independence, my own independence as a person. So I needed to kind of work that out before I was like, okay. And then I went to art school. Yeah,
because you studied English in college.
Yeah.
And the works that you are most known for are the obituaries, which we can talk about if you want to bring them up. And I actually sat there and read through these obituaries, and they come from you having been an obituary writer. So what fascinated me is that at some point you were a writer, right? You were working as a writer, writing obituaries, and then something shifted where you started to turn towards making objects. And well, you started to make text-based work. So you could show the first slide that says, sorry, we're dead. For that. You made these sort of signs that were very funny.
Yeah. Sure.
But the context is important too, and I feel like with all your work, context is important. Yeah. When did you first show that? What was the context?
That's one of the first things I made in New York when I came to New York in 2000. But to say, you know, when I had the job writing, it wasn't that I wrote and then I decided to make things. I studied, I always made things, and then I go to university and I study literature because I liked writing. Then I go to art school. Then I came back to London. And the job writing really was just, a friend had this job, and she said, there's a spot, do you want to do it? So writing 3 days a week seemed a pretty good job for an artist because it paid quite well, and it was relatively low stress. You didn't have to get in till 11 in the morning, there you go. But after a while, it became clear that there were things that it revealed that were interesting about obituaries, and it was also like a problem. Like, what am I actually doing with my life, as it were? So to come to New York was a decision, and I brought the obituaries as an idea with me. I'd made one of them in London, and then so text is, it's true. You're right. The text was always kind of,
it got you going.
It did get me going. Yeah, it did get me going, and it was always very to the front of my mind. And I always liked, art that Bruce Nauman or Johns or Manzoni or work that really used text really well. Just seemed particularly exciting. And so when I'm walking around in New York in 2000 and I'm seeing these hardware store signs that say, sorry, we're closed. The first one I made said, sorry, we're sorry. And I was really thinking that the city is full of language, and the language is speaking to you, but it really depends on your mind, how you hear it or what you hear. So, so sorry, we're sorry really says, sorry, the sign cannot give you anything. In fact, I can give you so little that I can only give you the same word again, which is sorry. That's all you're getting. So which is not unlike a Banana Republic ad that's with a picture of beautiful young people, probably white, which is either saying, depending on the viewer, you can have this and you're great, or it's saying you are not this and you never will have this, and this is not for you. So I was interested in that. I was like, so it was a short step really from sorry, we're sorry, to sorry, we're dead.
Well, I'm going to actually jump from that, since we have so little time, because it reminds me of, okay, so here are these famous obituaries. And really what I want people to know is that they're extraordinarily beautifully written, and they're very funny and fascinating, right? So they're about people that obviously aren't dead, and they're frozen in time. And I was going to have him read sort of the beginning and the end of some of them, but we don't have time. But they're kind of stunning portraits. I actually think that, so they're not just a knockoff to me. And this is what I think with your work. There's a way that the work can kind of seem deceptively, I don't simple or whatever, but that it's just overflowing with all of these ideas. So if we could jump from the obituaries to the graphite, which are on I think they're number 13 slide. through those. Those are the text works. We'll come back to talk about those. Next. Yeah. So yeah, these. You're also very well known for using graphite and making these extraordinarily beguiling objects, but they're kind of like the sign. They're sort of saying, I can't give you what it is I am, right? Because when you go through what they are, like you chose like a fountain that can't give water.
Yeah.
A clock that can't tell you time. And then this, I love this one, the down elevator button. And this birth control pills. Now that one seems a little different, but would you talk about what brought you to using the graphite? I know it has a lot to do with the ideas of the pencil and of drawing, but also of selecting these specific objects. Like for instance, what was the first object you made that was a graphite object?
The first one was the air conditioner, which was a Friedrich air conditioner. And yeah. I'd already been making paintings of air conditioners, of Friedrich air conditioners. Every time I found a different Friedrich air conditioner, I took a photograph and I sent it off to a company called mydavinci.com, who made a painting like they would normally make paintings of your dog or your family. So they made these oil paintings in China of a Friedrich air conditioner, and then it would come back to me and I would stretch it and put it on the wall and it would look like an air conditioner. I thought of the graphite a long time ago in the early 90s after CalArts, but where before the internet, before it was possible to research that, or for me. And it made sense when I finally persuaded a graphite company to work with me, and it made sense to make an air conditioner of graphite, because the air conditioners seem to me to be about wishing to change your environment. You're trying to change nature. You're basically saying, I'm not okay with reality. I want to change it. So this relationship to nature and to make an object in graphite that's about filtering and about change. When so I mean, the graphite came from, the obituaries are really, they're optimistic because they're saying you can change your life by making a decision. Every day you make a decision. They're narratives of decision making. And then you did this, and then she did this, and then she did this, and then she died. So they're hoping for that. So the graphite really originally came from this sense that that it was like an awareness of my own inability to read myself. It was like the hope that you can, it was like that, it was this sense of compression and that the material has. I did a drawing in 1994, which like a block, like a minimalist block, and it said block of graphite. And it seemed to come from this sense of wishing to excavate yourself or feel or make fluid your feelings into art, and at the same time the kind of inability to do that. So I think you're right. So then it makes sense to me to make a drinking fountain of graphite. I mean, apart from the fact that it was a way of being able to kind of make a homage, I called it fountain because it was a fountain. And then I could sort of nod to Duchamp or whatever, like in a sort of dumb,
very important,
sophomoric way. But it is a fountain that cannot deliver, or it's a water cooler that can't deliver, or it's an air conditioner, or it's a safe that is extremely fragile. Or so I think that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're either promising or representing, as I said, something that that, well, here's a yoga mat, which is funny. So I mean, we're being very serious. Obviously, there's humor in all of these too, right? And actually, it was very funny when I was looking at the fountain. I said, "Oh, I should look up what's the title." Of course, the title is fountain. What does the graphite come off? Do you have to spray it with anything? Because it's obviously it's a fragile material, right?
Yeah, it does come off. I mean, it's really the same. The industry that makes this industry is mostly works for the steel industry, and the dust from this industry is sold to pencil companies, and they use that dust to make pencils. So it is the same. It's all the same thing. It's graphite. It's pure carbon, and yeah, it does. It comes off. You know, the more they've been kind of wiped, the less it comes off. It's hard, but you could pick any of my sculptures up and draw with them in exactly the same way.
I was going to say, exactly.
Yeah, it is the same, yes. And obviously there is a joke in that there's some kind of inversion. And there's also the idea that they are dirty in a sense, that, you know, that you, I mean, an early piece I made was a Carl Andre floor piece. It was based on, it was like a homage to Carl Andre, but it also meant that you could walk on it and that you would then spread the dirt around the gallery. And one time I showed it on a white carpet because I was trying to make a connection between, the idea that the artwork is constantly depleted and is constantly falling apart, and also with this connection between minimalism and the kind of promise of holy salvation that minimalism, at least when I was a kid or a teenager, you know, learning about art, that was the message I got, that you would be salved by Ellsworth Kelly or Judd or whatever, and I think that there's something underneath minimalism that is much more. I mean, basically, you know, Judd is IKEA today. It's flat pack.
Exactly.
So it kind of dribbles down through the culture, maybe not as holy water, but maybe more like sort of chlorofluorocarbons in a spray can, you know, which never leave the landscape. So my Andre floor piece was called, or one of them, I made another one called Exxon Valdez after the oil spill. So I feel like I guess I was trying to work out why did I have these feelings about these pure artworks that I couldn't really vocalize. And I think it's about kind of punishment. I think there's a lot of punishment in Judd, and we like that because we want to punish. So,
Okay.
I mean, there's a picture, I think, in a slideshow of supercomputers that I made, graphite sculptures of supercomputers that I made a few years later, not so a few years ago, those are clearly meant to be threatening objects. I mean, designed by IBM, but they look like minimalism, and I was sort of like interested by that.
I mean, it does. It's also it's a huge nudge at the sort of history of art, and I do see that your work is often, almost every piece I've seen seems to be in conversation with about 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other artists or artworks, but you don't have to know that to appreciate it. I mean, but just these are a great example. But the material and the fact that now it's the dust that's then compressed into these. It's extremely, you know, it's very profound. So that's what I meant. You could walk into your show and walk around, maybe you show an image around image 19 and 20, of some of these objects at the Lever House, right? Yeah, here they are. So you walk in and you're saying you are saying to the well, you know, I don't know if you're not saying anything, but one has to think about those objects. It's not about just standing there and looking at them as much as it is. You're challenging and you're raising questions, even though they're incredibly beautiful. And so that could bring us, you know, let's quickly run back to, because you're a conceptualist, but you're also very much, yeah, a minimalist, a materialist. The material is so important to you. So the graphite, and then early on, I guess, I don't know what the chronology is, but you're also well known for these marvelous gum paintings, which if we could bring up some of those, they're early on.
I mean, I think the thing with the objects is that they're mostly, not all, but mostly fairly banal. They're mostly very familiar, and
right.
and like, yeah, like that. So, and if they're familiar, then maybe they're kind of available to everybody, to like a wide audience. So I think that's good. And in the same way with the hardware store signs, like everyone knows a hardware store sign. And the same way that like a newspaper page, like I know what that is. That's a newspaper page. So I feel like if you can take a thing that's very simple and very familiar, and then do as little as possible to it, to shift it, then you can make something that's talking to as many people as possible, because it's because it's all of the ingredients really are not very esoteric, in fact. So
right.
even the graphite, you look at the graphite and you see this object, you go, what is that? I don't know what that is.
Right.
At first, and if you haven't seen one before, and then you realize that you really have seen it before, because you probably saw an HB pencil when you were like 3. So what appears to be, you know, what appears to be troubling is not. And I think in that split second, what I want to do is make a moment where, like in that moment where you think you don't know where you are, then you kind of drop into a new place. And it's maybe the same thing with, like with an obituary. You go, Kate Moss is dead. And in that second where you think Kate Moss is dead, when she's not, then that's the only reason there are well-known people, is to make that moment. Because in that moment, maybe you drop into like a new room, and you're like, I don't know where I am at. And that's the room where the art is. I mean, that's how I find I relate to artworks, other people's artworks, is like they take me to this new place, and what's difficult is to find the door to that new place. But so I'm trying to do that with this, and it's the same with these artworks. In a way, it's the same way with the chewing gum. You know, it's like, what is this stupid material? It's great. Or sponge, same.
Sponge, I know. So again, very very familiar. But the joke is never just that. That's what I find so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and the joke is also fun. The joke is like added bonus. The joke is great because the joke is pleasure, and pleasure is, you know, I mean, one of the things I found at art school, which was a very sort of, this is the early 90s, height of political correctness, kind of first time around, very, pretty hardcore. It was like pleasure was a problem,
right,
for a start. And so, and modernism was, I mean, you know, enjoying art was kind of a problem. So it's like, how, as an art student, how do you compute that? How do you actually make art if pleasure is a problem? You know, so one thing I like about humor is that you can, it's like a glue which lets you stick together two opposing ideas. Like how do you take I understand the world and I don't understand the world as two opposing thoughts and put them together, or like I understand this reality and I have no idea where I'm at in my mind. How do you, so maybe humor is like a glue that can hold two things together, I think, maybe.
Yeah, and if you could go back to the gum paintings, the person who's in charge of the slides, it's around.
Right.
Actually,
right. Those kind of like, those images are on sponge, which are those are like recycling works of the original images I took of the gum on the sidewalk.
Yes, we could keep going back a little bit more to the original.
Yeah, and really it's the same. You know, the gum on the sidewalk just came from basically seeing this gum on the New York City sidewalks everywhere, and then thinking of myself as a you know, remembering being a British kid, aged 11, and being taught how, as a British person, I was an inheritor of we were the good guys. You know, we were British, and we saved the Europe, and we this is what you're taught in you know, from the age of,
same like in America, the old narrative.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have, but this is very loud so we're talking about the Second World War, and this is very loud in British culture. I mean, this is in the 70s, because we didn't have Vietnam. So we're still talking like 1972 or something, 72. I'm sort of 7 or 8, 9, and that's what we're learning about, and that's what so I'm based, so I began to be interested in the idea that on the one hand, I'm a kid and I'm being taught that it was okay that we bombed all of the cities in Germany, because that's what we were taught. And I made a work which is a photograph of myself, of me as Bomber Harris, and he's the guy who worked out how to do that. And it's like, that was okay. And then later, when I came to New York, I began reading about the bombings, especially W.G. Sebald, the writer, and realizing that there's like a different narrative. So in the meantime, I'm walking around New York, and I'm seeing this scum on the sidewalk, and it's just after 9/11, and I know people are literally fantasizing about destroying New York. And the next image, I think, is Dresden.
Yeah, the next.
Right. So I found that image in the Imperial War Museum. So I'm thinking, that's weird. That looks like this gum. And I'd been thinking about the gum because it was so stupid. It was like, surely somebody's done something with this gum all over the place. Like, you know. And once I saw these, and also photographs of craters from the Second World War, then it was a way for me to kind of put the contradictions that in my head about, from this like story of we did the right thing, we killed all these people, and then this other narrative of like, yeah, that's different. So that gray area with and then add to that my feelings walking around New York then, which is 2004, let's say. So it was like so you end up with a painting with gum that's mimicking craters, titled after a German city. That was basically, I'm just trying to kind of, for me, pour all this stuff in and mix it up and see if it expresses my confusion.
But that's what I keep going back to, is that there's these deep ontological deep questions about being that are in your work, as much as there's just the sort of funny idea of taking the gum that you see on the streets and turning it into an abstract painting.
Yeah, and it was also like a way of making a nod to Fontana or something, you know, like a very European painting. I mean, like you said, that if there seem to be allusions to other works, it's like an expression of love. It's like, hey, I love that, and it's kind of like a way of tipping your hat. It's me getting pleasure from saying hi, or kind of bowing down to. So Fontana, I'm like, yeah.
So we don't have much time left. So what I'd like to do is because of the times we're living in, it seems like, you know, with every artist, you can't help but ask, you know, here you are, you're living in New York. You've chosen to stay in New York. You obviously like New York. I think you're in your studio. You're not at some summer home. And an artist with as many sort of associations with sort of global ideas and then material reality. How has this been for you, being in quarantine, and has it inspired any new work? Excuse me.
It has been, I mean, yeah, I thought it's been difficult, and I don't know that it's inspired. I mean, it's definitely stirred up a lot of stuff for me, and I don't really know how. I suppose I'm just trying to work out what to do with it. I don't really know what it is, but
I know it's kind of an unfair question, but
right. I mean, but I think it's an incredible moment. It's like this amazing, and even before the protests, it was clearly an incredible. Literally, this has never happened before. The whole world on pause. So if you're aware, if you're like, I'm literally living through a crazy moment that's new, but that doesn't, even that awareness doesn't really, it's not really a key. And then now with the protest, it's like this shift is yeah. So it's like it's so much information that it's difficult to know what to do with it.
Yeah, and as I said, it's kind of an unfair question because we're in the middle of it. But it leads me to discuss the work that's currently up at Gagosian on 75th Street, which is called Escape from New York. Yes. If you want to bring up the slides, they're towards the end. And what's interesting is that at first, you know, it's called Escape from New York. So, okay, yeah. And it's well, why don't we look at it first? Let's just show it for a moment.
I mean, I can describe it. It's an installation I made, a work I made in 2014, and it's very simple and boring. I went through the 4 tunnels leaving New York, Midtown, Battery, Holland, and Lincoln, at 4 a.m. in a car with an iPhone on the dashboard, and just filmed the empty tunnels leaving the city. And I actually, after 9/11, I sat on 14th and 6th, where I lived then, and watched the towers go down, and been very aware of they closed the city, the tunnels and the bridges, and it was that feeling of the tunnels being these arteries that were kind of clipped then, and it has stuck in my mind for a long time. So the installation is the camera goes through the tunnels, and as it reaches the end of each tunnel, as the camera passes out under the edge of the tunnel, it loops back to the beginning. And starts again. So you never get out.
It reads as a kind of perfect metaphor for what's going on now, even though it's based on a work that you did a while ago.
It seemed it seemed interesting to put it on in this storefront, you know, an empty space on Park Avenue and 75th, in an empty street in an empty city.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be, without kind of exploiting the moment, it seemed to be, maybe it might speak to that feeling, because I think I was this sense of claustrophobia and anxiety, and this sense of going somewhere that you don't really know where it is, especially like this image. That's the battery tunnel. But yeah, so that's what that is, and it seemed like a way of making the whole street becomes the work. You know, the whole city becomes. I mean, the video. It's like if a loudspeaker is a box with a cone in it, the cone makes a sound, but the box, it's together they make this effect. And it seemed like a way of, if you put these little videos on monitors in the window, playing to the street.
We have a slide of that for people. We have a couple of slides of that towards the end of the installation.
Right. So I just hope that somebody might see it. Or, that's a work on, those are images of the tunnels. Yeah.
Right. Because you've done it. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully, I thought it might be comforting, actually, for a viewer to see that feeling on a.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, I guess this is going. We could just sort of. I was going to end with Escape from New York and open it up to questions, but this can sort of give people also an idea of the austerity of the installations. One of the things I found difficult about preparing for this conversation is I find it hard to speak about your work object by object. I feel that it's more about sort of the relationships, and your installations tend to be quite, what's the word? Quite, I mean, so reduced and yet so thought out. So I wanted people to see
those are trucks. Those are meant to be the backs of trucks.
These are the backs of trucks. See, there you go again. And what could describe what's going on with these? What to us look like white? I don't know. Are they just white with?
No, it's like I was interested in the back of a truck as a.
Oh,
so it's just a rectangle of material with a handle, and that sort of draws the truck, but it's a sculpture.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, is it a sculpture or is it? It's. I was thinking Walter de Maria, and then these are works on sponge. This is kitchen sponge. This is big sheets of green or white or orange kitchen sponge made by 3M. They make all the kitchen sponge in America. And then I buy these blocks of it and I print on it, and then there's a graphite object. And it's the same, like, so you look at it, you go, what is that material? I don't know what that material is. And then you realize it's the crappy piece of kitchen sponge in your kitchen sink is the same, it's the same stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And as a kind of, as an entrance, as a welcoming entrance point into the work, maybe. Yeah. So these are photographs of beds and then an object. And the bed is kind of like a homage to Felix Gonzalez Torres, but just this, like a landscape, like like landscapes.
Yeah.
Mountains.
Yeah. And again, to just go back to it, seemingly very simple, but filled with all sorts of questions about.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
I like it when art is kind of slow, like it has a slow release.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
And I think, hopefully, if you do, maybe, yeah. So I think that thing where if you keep scratching, like you reveal more and more and more.
Right.
Yeah. But you don't necessarily have to reveal it all at once.
Right. It's a choice. But yeah, because this morning Fawn called me and he mentioned, how important it is to start to have, to think in terms of being slow, right? And in terms of stopping and thinking and all these conversations almost as these various moments of, daily asking somebody, sitting down with somebody and slowly talking about it, and sort of collecting these. And your art, to think of your art as slow art, also changes it, because it brings in the idea of the responsibility of the person. When you go through a gallery, I get very distracted because you start going through too quickly. But this idea of being slow is very important, and I don't think it's obvious.
It's not very. I mean, it's not very. It's not very good for Instagram.
Well,
it's not very good. It's not very screen friendly.
Yeah.
But
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we see what? Open it up to the chat for some questions. We've covered a lot of ground, but at the same time, we've only scratched the surface. So.
Thank you so much, Thyrza. And I agree. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. I look forward to digging a little deeper after this, after seeing these images. The first question I will read aloud from the audience for Adam. The question is this: for the graphite works, can you talk a bit about how these are made? As I understand, graphite is a very fragile material. Do you make molds for these objects, then assemble them together with screws? That is the question.
Yeah, no, you can't cast graphite. They're machined. They're milled. So I make a 3D drawing with somebody I work with, and then we go back and forth, and we get that to what I think looks like I want it, and then pieces of graphite are cut, like milled and sliced and whatever, both kind of very high-end equipment and like 5-axis milling machines or huge great lathes that come from the 1940s that cut big blocks of graphite. So and then they're screwed and glued together. Yeah, as few pieces as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, our next question comes from a Rail team member, JC. I will pass the mic to you.
Captain, thank you, Thyrza and Adam, for this great conversation. I don't know, it was super interesting to meditate on the tunnel pieces a little bit, just because in the past few weeks with the protests, like the protesters have been sort of like closing the bridges and the streets, and there's been this kind of give and take with the city where they'll like let some things stand and not others. And I feel like they've made it pretty clear that the tunnels are like off limits. Like they will not allow protesters to close that exit. And then I was thinking about, there was kind of a similar line drawn last year in the protests against police brutality in the subways. Like the cops would they drew the line at like people trying to jump in the subway tunnels. Like that was like where they like snapped, Yeah. And so, and it's interesting to think about the way they closed the tunnels after 9/11, and I guess just the idea of escaping New York and like what we might be escaping feels extra relevant now. And I guess I'm just curious if the way you've thought about those works has changed, or if you see them kind of evolving with the city.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, because we only do, if you really think about it, or if you really push it, people only do what they're allowed. I mean, the protests are finding the limits of what's allowed. That's why the protests are so amazing, and important and brave, but the tunnels, the pieces for me, they're also about why can't you escape? You know what I mean? I mean, so what is it that stopping you escaping? I mean, in 9/11, it was I mean, literally speaking, it was, well, the tunnels are closed and you're not going anywhere. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people were walking over the Brooklyn Bridge every day. You know, it was crazy. But um, but I think what I'm thinking also is like, what is stopping you escaping in your mind? What is it? How do you feel, and why do you feel like that? And what are the, you know, what's going on? Why can't you change how you feel? So it's not only, you know what I mean? I mean, it's really about, I think, I have nothing to say about history or politics or, you know, what do I know? You know what I mean? Why would you go to an artist really to learn about that stuff? You would go to, but I'm trying to make a representation of a feeling, I think. And in this case, the feeling is, how do you get out?
Mhm.
And I think that, yeah, it's not really related to 2000 or 2001 or 2020. You know, I don't think it's, yeah.
Right. There's, it's also that why can't you get out? I think there's also the tunnels are really, they're expensive to go through with the tolls. And there's this, I guess just thinking about like not being allowed to escape after 9/11, but like who's escaped now? Like there's this like, like also like who's allowed to escape.
Yeah.
Is in that.
Right. And that kind of, those limitations are all around. I mean, I personally, I don't think anyone ever gets this, but for me, a lot of the Graphite works are about that. For me, they're about, that, you know, that they're about, why is stuff available or not available? I made some, I mean, in the most literal sense, some sculpture of Graphite machines, and they're different. You often go into a deli in New York and you see two ATM machines next to each other, but they're different. They're like different brands and different shapes. And it's like, wait, I don't understand that. They're both giving you the same stuff. How does that, why, you know, and it's very confusing, you know, and I find, and also, but also who's giving that stuff to me? And why is, you know, like, why are the banks, why does it cost $3? There's so many punitive structures in place everywhere, which are essentially exploitative. And you know, we're basically, they are in, I'm kind of like saying this is not okay, but
Well, can I just want to come in here because I know
that
it's always hard for artists to talk about your work, but your work also it's kind of obnoxious to make you talk about it because, as Wayne Kostenbaum said, your work doesn't explain, it demonstrates. And in a way, it's all about resisting, you know, easy explanations. It's more about affect and ideas that kind of, to me, bubble out almost like a pond. So,
I mean, I think the less you, I feel like the less you, I mean, I would hope to make something where you where you do as little as possible, because then you leave as much space for the viewer to come in and complete the work. So if I can do as little, I mean, and sometimes I'm like, I don't think I've done enough. It's like, okay, I made a drinking fountain, and then I made it of graphite. Is that enough? Shouldn't it have like a you know, a pink chrome flower? You know, I know, whatever. Is it? I mean, you know, John says, you know, take an object, do something to it, do something else to it. But the best artworks for me, I feel like it's where it's almost like it feels like the artist did nothing,
right.
And yet the viewer is suddenly given entrance to this huge landscape, this huge space, and that is really exciting, because you're like, oh my god, all they did is this, and suddenly my head is blown. So that's what
Mhm.
I like. Yeah.
It makes me think that your work is really good about provoking conversation back and forth. And also it's the kind of work that is also, I mean, it's just personal, but you know, for me, it's work that makes me want to write about it, right?
Right,
Because
but people never write about my work. There's no writing about my
well,
work.
I just want to give a shout out. There's a catalog that's called
True, but
on a show.
you
The
know,
writing in it is, I mean, Lane Raylia wrote a fantastic essay.
Aurelia.
Yeah. I wrote him a MASH note after I read
Well,
it.
it's nice of you to say so.
And I think it's one of the most, it's a fantastic catalog. It's just beautiful. And what's wonderful is that as writers, they talk about the difficulty of writing about your work in the sense that there's not an easy through line, and that, you know, that because they're all very different, but that also they kind of resist narrative and description at the same time. They just are. They just are, like what you were saying. So anyway, this is quite a remarkable catalog. So it's put out by, I'm not sure. Anyway, any other questions and stuff?
Yeah, so next we'll actually go to Fong. Fong, I will pass the mic to you. One moment.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, Fong.
Hi, Thyrza. Thanks
Hi,
for an incredible conversation. It got me excited. I've been thinking about your work for so long, and I remember because you mentioned Carl Andre, and I interviewed Carl, may have been already 6 years ago, but I remember in one instant, in the middle of it, he made reference to Lawrence Weiner, and he say, I don't know how good you are as a sculptor, but you certainly are a hell of a good poet. So in reference to language, you know, because Ezra Pound, who was Andre sort of mentor, you know, he went to St. Elizabeth when Pound was sent back for treason.
Really?
45. I think Card went there with Frampton because of Frampton Hollis.
Right.
Hollis came there first, obviously. But Pound's a big hero for all of them. But I remember Pound say, neither can anyone learn English. One only learn a series of Englishes. I don't mean a language, but to use the language to think in. And I think that's one way of thinking about your work, but I'm curious. This is a longer question. I always don't know how to make it haiku, my question. So forgive me. But you know, in regard to language, in philosophy, we always go back to Wittgenstein because he was so smart. He's one of those people who can do that. You know, he's things like what we cannot speak about, we must pass, you know, over in silence, you know, thing of that nature. But I remember when I met Isaiah Berlin, I asked him about,
I met him.
Wow.
I did me too. Cool. That's another conversation we should have.
Amazing. What a guy.
Yes, I spent a weekend with him and Lady Berlin in 92. But that's another story. We can go to that. But you know, the thing is that his famous essay.
He would always say, you would suggest something to him and he would go, no doubt.
That's right.
That's no doubt.
Yeah, but I did ask him. I did try to ask him why the famous The Hedgehog and the Fox, you know, initially was published in Oxford in the early 50s, 53, 52, or I don't remember exact year, but it became a sensation when it was included in his classic volume, published by Viking Press in 1977 in New York. And it included that essay, The Hedgehog and the Fox.
Yeah.
And it was so famous. It changed the course of how every aspiring intellectual were to be forced to choose whether to be a hedgehog or to be the the fox, right? We know the premise, what it meant. It's like the hedgehog, the one who can see the world, however vast the experiences he or she sort of, bring it in, but it had to filter through one singular vision, as opposed to the fox who refused to see the world as one perspective or one point of view. And I remember he enumerated two sides of it. The hedgehog would be Plato, Lucretius, Dante, Pascal, Hegel, all the way to Proust and Dostoevsky. And the fox would be Herodotus, Aristotle, Erasmus, Shakespeare, Montaigne, Molière, Goethe, all the way down to Tolstoy, So in regard to you, I don't know where you belong. I mean, you certainly appeal, don't you think, to the hedgehog? But you're not so invested in the certain kind of system at all, which is so much of card works and minimalist art is so depend upon. You like the idea of language. You like idea of of these incredible haiku ideas into the object that you make, but you move around a lot.
Yeah.
So where are you? I mean, are you?
Well, yeah, I don't know. No, I mean, well, good. I wish I knew. Yeah. But I always, I remember feeling very strongly from quite young that I didn't like, that I thought an artist should constantly keep evolving and constantly keep going. And then I guess the model, I guess I looked at when I first learned about Bruce Nauman's work, it really had a big effect on me, and CalArts, and because it seemed like it was just constant. It could be anything, and it could take any form, and it just depended on the problem that he was trying to investigate, which was often, using language as a sort of tool or something, or as a chisel, or and so I kind of felt that it was like it would be I don't know. That just somehow fitted the way my mind worked, and you can go, well, that's great, because you can look at early Stella. You look at the first 10 years of Frank Stella's going, oh my God, he did this and they did this and they did this. It's like, but it's very hard to sustain that. So whereas, in fact, you look at Carl Andre, and it's this incredible system that or Soloit, and it's amazing how it's like, if the system is strong enough at the beginning, it will in fact give a whole life of making. So now I'm like, getting on, and I'm like, shit, where's my system? But I think that you could say, if I look at the world and I see all these different things and all these different people and all these different languages and all these different experiences, then why would it not take a corresponding variety of responses and objects, things, idea, so machines. Let's call them machines. Let's call a sculpture or an artwork a machine. Why wouldn't it take an infinite number of fantastic, endlessly different machines to express that world? So that would, that's my
Well, thank you, because I did ask him in the end, and he admitted it's an intellectual game. Because in the end of that famous essay, he tends to argue that Tolstoy may be the fox, but who aspired to be the hedgehog.
Right.
Yeah.
You want to be what?
Adam, I think, Adam, you're the fox aspiring to be the hedgehog.
don't please,
Yeah.
don't make me feel the reductivist here. I just,
But I think the aspiring is the point.
yeah,
It's all about trying. It's
yeah.
about, I mean, you know, I think it's the trying that's interesting. Even the notion that you can try, even in the, like, I'm in this reality, but I'm pretty sure there's a different reality, and how can I get to it? So I feel like my graphite sculptures, it looks like a drinking fountain, and it kind of, but it exists slightly to the left and slightly behind the real drinking fountain. It's like a simultaneous other reality, and it's like, well, what are you talking about? I'm just talking about the notion that you, just by being alive, are constantly trying to imagine something else,
Right.
and then
Thank
you
you,
die.
Adam. Perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you, Fong, for that question. The next question actually comes from our poet today, Chris Martin, and I will read their question aloud. Earlier, Chris commented that he saw a lot of resonance with Felix Gonzalez Torres's work called Perfect Lovers, and just the notion of active obituary or a relic yet to come. And that was a really neat comment. But going off of that,
I love that work.
yeah, it's really
at Cal Arts, Felix Gonzalez Torres was there while I was there on a sabbatical, and I met with him many times. I didn't take his class, but we would meet, and he was just the most generous and incredible teacher and incredible artist, but amazing person.
Cool. The question is, or Chris would just like to hear about what you think about graphite works in the frame of obituary. They feel very somber and symbolic, like almost gravestone sculpture, but simultaneously very neutral, but also strangely ready to mark any surface they encounter. So if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, that's right. Like, I don't know what I am, the hedgehog or the fox or the hedgehog, and you look at my work and it seems sort of so disparate. Like, I mean, I think the for me, an obituary of Kate Moss, a living, you know, it is the same thing as a graphite sculpture, and is the same thing as a gum painting with gum that relates to bombing cities, is the same thing as a text message. Like, I feel that whatever you're trying to say, you don't really know what it is, but you place these things around it. I mean, each work is facing and speaking to this absence, which is what you're trying to say. So the more pieces you make, the more you hopefully complete this sentence, and each work is just a different way of saying the same thing. So I mean, because I remember when I was at Oxford studying Henry James, who is great, and he has these incredibly long sentences, but the thing with James is, like, really, what is he talking about? You know, it's like he goes on and on and on. But he makes, like in Portrait of a Lady, great book, he makes a woman's psyche by writing all around it. So the whole book is a kind of a drawing where, when you finish, what you end up with is you know, by what is not said as much as what is said, you end up with an idea of this person. And I feel, I think of that as a sort of analogy of making art. You don't really know what you're trying to say, but you throw another stick down on the fire or in the pile. And by the shapes that are made, or even by the absence of shapes, is what you is how they relate to each other, is what you end up with.
Adam, I can't help but to add the following, since you mentioned Henry James. Hilary Putnam, one of my favorite poets, American at Harvard, his father said to him once, the thing about the James brothers, Henry and William James, is that one writes novel like a psychologist and the other writes psychology book like a novelist.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yes, exactly. He's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
I also appreciate, Adam, how, this is Chris,
Hey, Chris.
Another resonance I hear with Gonzalez Torres is that there's a tenderness, there's like a wedding of tenderness and neutrality. The way you talked about like feeling that, admiration for other artists and reaching out. And it feels like with those objects, with the graphite, there's this like really wonderful tender neutrality.
Right. I'm glad. I'm really glad to hear that, because there is, yeah. And I don't know, you don't know if people get that, and you don't know if it comes through, because I mean, my work is very mediated through, like, it's writing, language, and it looks like a newspaper, and it's graphite, and it's milled and three-dimensional, all of which it's mediated by my inability to express myself. It's that's all a function of my not being able to express myself or to feel, you know what I mean? So therefore I'm very, and yet it's actually driven by love, or emotion.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to hear that, because Felix Gonzalez Torres is so good at it's like everything is available, love and I mean, it's so generous. You can take the stuff away. I mean, he is so open and vulnerable, and I find that much more difficult. But I'm glad, because I think, there's a quote I think from Ed Ruscha, where in that catalog essay with Dave Hickey, that I don't want a retrospective, that catalog. So it's like late 80s, where he's like, Ed Ruscha says, well, yeah, I think everything you make really just comes from pointing at things that you love. And I think he's referring to the Hollywood sign, maybe, or or language, or words, sounds, like oof.
Yeah, oof.
Oof. And there's another one, I want to say bomb, but it's not bomb. It's like a sound like that. And I remember seeing Ed Ruscha talking. He was like, oh yeah, well, it was like, well, what does that painting mean? Like, what is that? What's that about? What's the meaning of that? He's like, well, I was thinking about the sound when somebody has a big bag of bacon and they just drop it on the counter, and it's like, that is what it's about. It's about him loving that moment. And so I'm glad if some tenderness comes through, because really that's really what it's all about.
Right, and the idea of attention as a form of love.
Yeah.
The moment that you talked about the air conditioner, I thought about that. These things that live among us, the seemingly like furniture of our lives, but that you become intimate with.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, yeah, that's right. That's the weird side of it, is that you do become intimate with these inanimate, designed objects that function around you. But I also thought, that work for me comes from being, my mother was American, and she came from New York. And I remember being about 7 or 8 and coming to New York with my family and being in a hotel room. And there was under the window was a big air conditioner unit. And it was just blasting, freezing cold air. This is in the summer in New York, New York City. And I remember being about, small and absolutely horrified and appalled by this thing, that was, by this object that was blowing freezing air at me, like almost, what a really, and for a European, like you don't have air conditioners, and also you don't necessarily immediately go to the move of like, nature's too hot, I'm going to make it cold, which is a very American, it's like, I'm feeling ill, I'm going to take some pills. So and in Europe, it's like, well, it's hot, so we open the window and we get a bit hot, like Italy or wherever, like we design a building, like in Spanish culture, we make a building where the walls are thick and the air gets through and it's great. Yeah. It's like, no, in America, it's like, so I was thinking that it was funny to think of an air conditioner as a way of changing nature. And that's what, and I like the idea of them being called Friedrich air conditioners, because then you have Caspar David Friedrich, who's like, nature is sublime, it's so beautiful. And it's like, in America, it's like, no, it's hot, make it cold. And then the logical extension of that is like, no, I'm gonna die, I don't want to die. So it's like, how can I not die? Do you have any pills that can make me not die? And actually, that is where we're at now. It's like, yeah, in fact, Peter Thiel, founder of PayPal, is like, I'm not dying. I'm going to download my consciousness into a hard drive. And so on the one hand, all of this equipment around us is kind of strangely intimate. And I think on the other hand, it's also, so it's both, it's intimate and horrific at the same time. And maybe the funniness can stick them together.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Chris, for those questions. Our final question comes from Malvika. Malvika, I will pass the mic to you.
Oh, hey. I don't know if we can beat the Caspar David Friedrich air conditioner. So I'm hesitant to like even ask my question, but here it is. So in an interview I found with you, you're speaking about text messages and obituaries, and you describe sort of the genre of both as democratic, or that your kind of desire for them is that they become democratic. But then like you also go on to say that like the obituary can't really be quite democratic because it's obviously a biography for the archive, and it's like mediated by power. And that I was reminded so much of like the front page of the Times that ran in May, the remembering the 100,000 lost to COVID, which I felt was like surprisingly successful at sort of doing the impossible task of eulogizing or summing up in like one line so many people. And I don't know, I was thinking about sort of how it deals with the kind of anonymity and intimacy, but also like by putting these people in relation to one another in this way, it kind of becomes a fiction. And I was wondering, like, I wanted to get your take on that. And en route, I also was thinking that we're now seeing a very different kind of eulogizing just 1 month later of Toyin Salau, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all of these people who've been sort of murdered by the police. And I was wondering if you could talk more about the eulogies and possibly how that kind of form relates to your idea of a kind of like how a democratic form would function, how it should be functioning, like how these eulogies are functioning right now. I know that's very ambiguous. I'm so sorry.
No. I thought that page was good. The front page of the New York Times was very effective. But I think the reason it's effective is for what it's almost like, as it were, art reasons. It was effective because it was visually so. It was visually what it was. I mean, it was very beautiful. I thought if you put a bunch of text like that in a block on a page, it's like a mass thing. It's a question of mass almost, no, linguistic mass. It's like the Vietnam War Memorial. You know, it's such an effective memorial for a similar reason, I think. But and what you said about and also that list of names on the front page of the Times is really, you know, it's only the name. There's no information about the person. So it's really it's about the decision to memorialize on the part of the paper. The paper has decided to give this space to these names. And I think the viewer, that's what you respond to. You are like in accord with that decision. It's like, yes, we must memorialize these people. You don't even need the obituary. You know what I mean? I mean, there isn't space in this in that moment, but and then and you're right. I mean, the thing with the obituaries, part of my other thing was when I made the obituaries was that they are wrong. You know, they're not true. Like I have this job for the paper. I'm writing the paper. It's 5 o'clock. Somebody's died. We've got to write his obituary. Like JFK Jr. died. I wrote his obituary. Apparently apparently this has happened. I get the clippings from the record. I get these paper clippings and I write this obituary, which will be printed in a paper that had a readership of 1 million, which is a very big in Britain. And then it's technically, and then it becomes history. But it's like, I know that I just wrote it from the clippings from the previous papers, and they were written by another journalist at 5 p.m. on a Friday evening, you know? And it's like, this is total bullshit. This is the relationship between this person's life and my obituary is completely random and false. And so that's a cliche I was protesting that relationship in a sense. I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's like the other day, Bill Barr, the Attorney General said, you know, when they said, well, what are you doing? Like doing this stuff? And he's like, I don't care. History is written by the winners. And that's the point. And he's right. And it's disgusting. So, you know, one aspect of the obituaries is they are about loss of control for me. In fact, I did one about Caster Semenya, the South African runner, the girl who was drug tested. They said, we're going to test you for drugs. And then they came back to her and said, oh, by the way, we tested you for a sex test and we've decided that you're not a woman. And then you know, and then everything blew up and then they had to change. But for me, that story is, I wrote it because that is like the abuse of power. There's power at work all the time, and most of the time it's abused. And she seemed like such an example of what could be more of an abuse. Imagine if somebody said that you're not a girl, that you're, you know, it's like your whole identity. And they said, not you said, they said. As for, I mean, I think, as for now and protests and George Floyd, I think it's like, I think what's powerful is the decision. It's like I say, the decision. Like we don't know George Floyd's full life story. We maybe know a lot, but I think when we see his name, he functions as a kind of as a point where everybody coalesces, everybody's pain and outrage meets, and that's why he's so important, and those names. So, but I think it's like a very complicated relationship between many people and many people's feelings, essentially. and where they when somebody's name, when somebody gets placed into that position. That's why it's so powerful. It's just so instant, like in a second. And also because by the way, I thought with those obituary works, I don't think you need to read them as artworks. I try to write them as best as I can, but it's not really about the content. It's about the decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you, Malvika, for that question. It's a really good way to end this conversation. So we have a tradition at the Rail. We end each lunch with a poem, and today we're delighted to have Chris Martin, who asked a question earlier. He'll read a poem for us. First, I'll introduce him. Chris Martin's fourth book of poetry, Things to Do in Hell, will be published by Coffee House Press in the fall, and his first book of essays, May Tomorrow Be Awake, on poetry, autism, and our neurodiverse future, is forthcoming from Harper One. He's the co-founder and executive director of Unrestricted Interest, an organization dedicated to helping neurodivergent learners transform their lives through writing. He lives in Minneapolis, where he also teaches at Hamline University and Carleton College. Chris, we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been wonderful to listen for the last little bit and to be a part of this, because art has always been a big part of my life and practice. I used to live in Brooklyn for like 10 years, and during one of those years, I was in a art gallery in Chelsea looking at your obituaries, Adam, and really struck by them. So it's wonderful to somehow meet up with you now here across the Zoom. Yeah, and I think I'll read a couple poems that are, I think, in this active obituary state. That's like kind of the engine behind them. They're very much talking about being alive, but I think that the whole subtext is that they could soonly not be. Yeah, it's this book that's coming out in the fall, Things to Do in Hell, is like, I'm embarrassed how timely it is. And these poems were written several years ago, but they feel very present now. And yeah, and hopefully that won't be true at some point in the future, but it seems like that's one of the things I kept having a conversation with my publisher, because I was like, I'm worried that if the right things happen in October of 2020, that people will forget that we're living in hell. And so lately it's been a good reminder that hell has been a continuous part of especially American existence for a very long time. So yeah, a lot of the book was actually inspired by one of my oldest friends, who's also my favorite artist. I'll put a little link here. His name is Simon Evans, and we've been just amazing. We've lived apart for almost our entire lives of having known each other, but have stayed really close. And he's done all the covers for my books, and he actually is contributing interior art to this book. So that's one way in which the book intersects with art, but also the first poem I'll read, which was a founding poem of this long abecedarian series in the book, which kind of proceeds through the alphabet, was originally inspired by a show at the Walker, let me get this link to, by Sia Armajani, called Follow This Line. So I'll read two poems. And also, if you haven't read this book, Alphabet by Inger Christensen, this is also a big influence for these poems that I'll read, because it's an abecedarian poem. Inger's book, length poem, is kind of pre-apocalyptic. It's like nuclear pre-apocalyptic. My poems are a little bit more post. So the first poem I'll read is the first poem in that series, and it's called Zealous. I am alive at night. I am alive between cities. I am alive crossing from fear to regret. I am alive during the broadcast. I am alive eventually. I am alive for the moment. I am alive gazing and glowing at this window's edge. I am alive how and why. I am alive in the uncertain hands of another. I am alive just as the haunch of a listening horse trembles. I am alive, kind of like you, except entirely different. I am alive like a rumor or mirror. I am alive mostly at night. I am alive nowhere but as I am named. I am alive only slightly. I am alive pawed and whiskered. I am alive quiet in the pause between elegies. I am alive right away. I am alive sudden and insatiable. I am alive to those who hold me with necessary desperation. I am alive unless I am not. I am alive very nearly always at night. I am alive, whereas the faceless reader is too alive. I am alive exactly the way a wild spinach leaf is alive. I am alive, you know, I am alive, zealous in my hunches. Thank you, thank you. And the second poem I'll read is from further on in the series. It is called The Next Day. And these are actually, there's only three that take on the I am alive repetition. Every other poem in the series has its own repetition, but I figured I'd read these two. The next day. I am alive at dawn. I am alive because I am quick. I am alive cast in the bronze light of a November sick. I am alive deep in the recesses of a dark arc. I am alive every time death forgets to breathe. I am alive for just a few real moments. I am alive gut and angle. I am alive high above the scrap heap. I am alive if living is the opposite of ease. I am alive jowl and grit. I am alive knee to spleen. I am alive low in the animal hum. I am alive more like a wave than a particle. I am alive now that the infidels have been rousted from the towers. I am alive, or I am a symptom of aliveness others curate to recognize the seed. I am alive pacing the temporary autonomous zone. I am alive quick against the hush. I am alive red, livered and warm in the pulverized dreg. I am alive so that the dead might be nightly sung. I am alive the next day and thrum through each braided strand of my sorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for those beautiful and very well picked poems for today. It's also really great to see poets and artists having conversation. That's what the Rail's about. And thank you, Thyrza and Adam, for the really thoughtful conversation. If everybody, you can activate your mic now if you would like to say goodbye as you leave. Please join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Same link, same time, for a conversation with Amber Musser, Paul Kaplan, with our very own Amanda Goodeve. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thank you both so much.
Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Paul.
Thyrza. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, it was very enlightenment.
That was really fun. It was fun